martial arts fans. Welcome to Budocast. We are the podcast that brings you the latest news from the world of martial arts, from the dojo to the ring and beyond. From competition results to new training techniques, we've got you covered. We want to hear from you. If you have news to share, a story to tell, or a question, visit https://budocast.com to send us an email. Let's get into the news.
Yeah, and there is an absolute mountain of news to get into today.
There really is. Okay, let's unpack this. Because our mission for this deep dive is to basically take this monumental stack of announcements, the rumors, the grudges, and just extract the actual underlying mechanisms driving them all right now.
Right, because we're looking at a sport that is just teetering on this wild edge of pure cultural spectacle, complex digital manipulation, and some incredibly bitter human emotions.
Exactly. We're looking at historic event setups that honestly defy all logistical sense. We've got contract disputes exposing the brutal corporate math of sports promotion.
Oh, the business side is ruthless right now.
It is. Plus, we're breaking down digital bot controversies, and we're analyzing these 4-year-old gym grudges that are finally boiling over into the octagon.
Which is just fascinating from a psychological standpoint.
Completely. So for you, the listener, we want to figure out what all this actually means for the athletes putting their bodies on the line. And I think we have to start with the biggest, shiniest object in the MMA universe right now.
Oh, absolutely. UFC Freedom 250.
Yeah. UFC Freedom 250. Dana White's announcement for this event is it's unprecedented, not just in scale, but the sheer environmental audacity of it.
June 14th. Washington, D.C., coinciding directly with the 250th anniversary of the United States.
Right. And President Donald Trump's 80th birthday.
Which is a massive cultural convergence.
It is. And the logistical architecture of this thing, it literally breaks my brain. They are giving away 85,000 free tickets.
85,000.
Just to put that into perspective for you guys, a massive sold-out arena show, like a huge pay-per-view, that caps out around 18 to 20,000 people.
Max. Usually less.
Right. And they are funneling 85,000 bodies into the Ellipse, which is the park right there south of the White House, just to watch on big digital screens.
Yeah.
But the fights themselves?
Yeah, the actual octagon.
It's being constructed on the South Lawn.
Which, from a human performance standpoint, fundamentally alters the neurobiology of the fight. We really have to talk about the amygdala response here.
Oh, I want to hear this.
Well, the human nervous system is incredibly sensitive to environmental context.
Right.
Fighters spend 10, maybe 15 years of their lives training in very specific conditions. Sweaty, echoing gyms.
4 walls, a roof.
Exactly. Consistent acoustics.
Yeah.
The brain learns to categorize those very specific sensory inputs as the combat zone.
The safe place to do violence.
Yeah, exactly. Now, you take that same fighter and drop them onto the lawn of the Executive Mansion of the United States.
The threat detection center of the brain just has to be going into absolute overdrive.
Completely.
Yeah.
The brain is suddenly processing this massive visual anomaly. Instead of the familiar corporate branding of the T-Mobile Arena, the backdrop is the most famous residential building on the planet.
It's surreal.
You have the historical weight of the 250th anniversary, the political gravity, the Secret Service presence. And just beyond those iron gates, you have this localized seismic event of 85,000 fans roaring.
Just a wall of sound.
Right. We always talk about athletes freezing under the bright lights, but this isn't just a bright light. This is the glaring spotlight of global history.
So how do you even cope with that?
It requires a level of psychological compartmentalization that goes way beyond standard sports psychology.
Yeah.
You literally have to convince your central nervous system that the 750 square feet of canvas in front of you is exactly the same as your gym back home.
Even when every single cue is screaming that it's not.
Exactly.
And mechanically looking at how that environment affects the physical performance, fighting outdoors is just a wildly different biomechanical puzzle.
The acoustics alone.
Yes. In a closed arena, the roar of the crowd bounces off the ceiling. It bounces off the walls. It creates this localized pressure cooker of sound, right?
Yeah, the fighters feel it physically.
They do, and they use that acoustic feedback. They hear their cornermen because the arenas are designed for it, and they subconsciously gauge the impact of their own strikes by the sharp crack echoing off the wall.
But outdoors,
sound just dissipates into the atmosphere.
it just vanishes.
It feels eerily silent to the fighters in the center of the cage. And when you remove that auditory feedback, you disrupt a fighter's spatial awareness.
It creates an auditory vacuum.
Yeah.
And then you factor in the matchups they're throwing into this vacuum.
Oh man, the matchups. Ilia Topuria unifying the lightweight title against Justin Gaethje, which is violent enough on its own.
Absolutely terrifying fight.
But the crown jewel is Alex Pereira versus Cyril Gane, with Pereira attempting to capture a belt in a third weight division.
Which is a feat completely unmatched in the sport's history. No one has done 3 belts.
Never. And from a pure biomechanical and strategic perspective, this specific matchup in this specific environment is just insane.
It's a clash of fundamental kinetic energy.
Yes. Think about how Alex Pereira generates his power. That terrifying concussive left hook of his. It relies entirely on his ability to plant his feet perfectly into the canvas.
He needs that friction.
He has to have it. He creates this rigid kinetic chain from the ball of his foot up through his hip and right into his shoulder. Now, put him on an octagon built over a grass lawn in Washington, D.C.
In the middle of June.
In June. The humidity is going to be suffocating. The canvas absorbs that moisture from the air. It gets incredibly slick.
So if Pereira loses even 10% of his foot traction?
He loses the entire foundation of his knockout power. He can't torque.
Wow. Well, on the other side of the cage, you have Cyril Gane.
Right, a heavyweight who moves with the bouncing, elusive footwork of a bantamweight.
Yeah, Gane's style is essentially just an amplified fencing system.
Exactly. He doesn't plant to throw power. He touches, angles off, constantly circles. He relies on relative positioning, not rooted leverage.
So if the canvas is compromised by humidity,
the fighter who relies on planting is at a massive disadvantage compared to the fighter who relies on momentum and light footwork. The environmental variables are literally stacking the deck before a single punch is thrown.
Which raises an important question about the intersection of sport and spectacle. When you introduce this many volatile external variables like the acoustics, the weather, the historical pageantry, does the spectacle fundamentally compromise the purity of the competition?
It's the ultimate question for this event. It's like scheduling the Super Bowl to be played on a grass field in the middle of a Thanksgiving Day parade down a city street.
That's a great way to put it.
You've got floats going by, politicians giving speeches, just sheer sensory chaos. Does the distraction ruin the performance?
The fighters who succeed on that South lawn won't necessarily be the ones who had the most scientifically optimized training camps. They'll be the ones with the most resilient, adaptable minds.
Adaptability is the ultimate survival trait here.
It is. But you know what is equally fascinating? Looking at who is not invited to this historic spectacle.
Oh, the outsiders?
Right. Because some fighters thought their political alignment would save them, but the corporate machine is a ruthless meritocracy.
It really is. And this is where the business algorithm of the UFC becomes incredibly glaring. We need to pivot to Colby Covington's complete exclusion from the Freedom 250 card.
Yeah, this is a heavy topic.
It is. And before we break down the mechanics of this situation, we need to be crystal clear with you, the listener. The sources we are analyzing today detail Colby Covington's explicit political statements and his long-standing ties to Donald Trump.
Very publicly.
Right. We are impartially reporting these statements purely as factual elements from the source material to understand the negotiation leverage and business dynamics of the UFC. We are taking absolutely no political sides here, left or right. Our focus is strictly on the mechanics of sports promotion.
Precisely. We're just analyzing the return on investment of a fighter's carefully constructed brand.
So, looking at the baseline facts, Colby Covington genuinely believed he was a guaranteed lock for this White House card.
A shoo-in.
Yeah. And from a promotional perspective, his logic actually tracks. He points out in the sources that he was wearing the Metier hat in Times Square with his championship belt way back in 2018.
Long before it was normalized in the broader sports world.
Exactly. He leaned heavily into this specific political alignment. He viewed himself as the connective tissue between the current political zeitgeist and the UFC's fan base.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, he essentially made a synergistic bet. He intertwined his entire professional identity with a specific political narrative.
Assuming that when the promoter finally built an event tailored exactly to that narrative, his loyalty would be this undeniable currency.
But that's just not how the corporate algorithm works.
Not at all. Covington goes into negotiations with UFC executive Hunter Campbell. And here is a crucial tactical detail. Covington represents himself.
He's his own agent.
Right. He acts as his own agent. He tells Campbell, and I'm quoting directly from the sources here, "I'm the company man. You're the face that runs the place. I listen to you."
Playing the good soldier angle aggressively.
Aggressively. But Campbell simply tells him there is no opponent for him on the White House card. and instead he offers him a fight later in the year against the winner of Mike Malott versus Gilbert Burns.
The vulnerability in that moment is just palpable.
Yeah, how does that affect a fighter mentally?
Well, when you act as your own agent, you remove the necessary psychological buffer between the athlete and the corporation. An agent can hear, you aren't valuable enough for this card, and translate it into cold business terms.
They soften the blow.
Exactly. But when the athlete hears it directly, after dedicating years of their life to building a brand specifically for this type of moment, it becomes a deeply personal rejection.
It has to hurt.
Covington's reaction in the interviews isn't pure anger. He actually says he is bummed.
Bummed. Wow.
Right. That is a remarkably deflated human admission from someone whose entire public persona is engineered around being this untouchable, thick-skinned antagonist.
It's the harsh realization that your brand doesn't dictate the matchmaking.
Never does.
And because he is locked out, Covington is scrambling to control the narrative. We see a rising prospect, Bo Nickal, publicly claim that Covington ducked a fight with him for the White House card.
And Covington fires right back.
Immediately goes on the offensive. He calls Nickal a quitter, specifically pointing to Nickal's grappling match against Gordon Ryan. And he calls him an easy fight because he lacks elite striking.
He's doing everything he can to maintain relevance.
Exactly. He's even pivoting to take a co-main event fight against Dillon Danis at RAF 07 in Tampa, just to stay active.
Going to a completely different promotion.
Yeah. He is taking his highly curated brand outside the UFC because their door is currently closed to him.
It perfectly illustrates the danger of building your legacy on a gimmick, rather than undeniable competitive results. When the gimmick is no longer required by the promoter, you just have nothing left to negotiate with.
But wait, what happens when you do have the undeniable competitive results? What happens when you are arguably the greatest mixed martial artist to ever live, and you are still left out in the cold?
Oh, you mean Jon Jones?
That brings us to Jon Jones.
The Jon Jones situation is the absolute apex of the tension between an aging athlete and a corporate promoter.
It's a mess. Dana White stated to the media that Jon Jones is retired and was never strongly considered for the Freedom 250 card.
Which Jones did not appreciate.
Not at all. Jones, who had explicitly unretired with the sole intention of headlining this specific event, immediately took to X to demand his release from his UFC contract.
Publicly demanding to be let go.
Yeah. Jones claims they were in real negotiations, but the UFC severely, quote, lowballed him financially.
And the really complicating variable here is the medical reality. Jones publicly admits he is suffering from severe hip arthritis that requires a replacement.
Yes, and Jones weaponizes this against the UFC. He points out the blazing hypocrisy of their stance. He essentially asks, if I had accepted your terrible financial offer, would my hip suddenly be deemed magically fine by your doctor?
Exposing the selective medical concern of the promotion.
Exactly. But we really have to look at the sheer biomechanical reality of Jon Jones fighting with this condition. He hasn't fought since defeating Stipe Miocic back in November of 2024.
Right.
He is 38 years old. He is a heavyweight. And he has bone-on-bone hip arthritis.
The anatomical implications of that are just catastrophic for a professional fighter.
Let's break down the actual mechanics of the hip joint in combat sports, because the hip is the absolute engine of the human body.
The core of all movement.
Yes. The acetabulum, the socket, and the femur head, they need smooth, lubricated cartilage to rotate.
Yeah.
Every single offensive and defensive movement in martial arts initiates from that rotation.
Every single one.
When Jon Jones throws one of his signature oblique kicks, the kinetic energy doesn't start in his foot. It starts with the internal rotation of his hip snapping forward.
Right.
If the cartilage is gone, and it is just bone grinding on bone, it doesn't just cause excruciating pain. It fundamentally alters the nervous system's ability to fire the surrounding muscles.
Yeah, the body instinctively inhibits muscle contraction to protect the damaged joint.
It shuts itself down.
Literally. You cannot recruit the fast-twitch muscle fibers required for explosive movement because your brain is overriding the signal to prevent further skeletal trauma.
Exactly. So when Jones needs to violently sprawl to defend a takedown from some 260-pound elite heavyweight,
It's not going to happen.
his hip structurally cannot absorb that kinetic shock, and his nervous system won't let his muscles fire fast enough to drop his weight. Strategically, stepping into the octagon with a failing hip is a death sentence.
It really is.
That fraction of a second of hesitation, that inability to generate torque, that is the literal difference between slipping a punch and getting knocked unconscious.
And yet, he is demanding to fight.
He wants back in.
This is the tragic twilight of the athletic gods, isn't it? Jones is experiencing the universal psychological terror of the elite athlete, realizing they no longer control. The fighter is looking at their soul, their pride, and their desperate need to author their own final chapter. It is a clash of irreconcilable motivations.
It really is. We are watching the physical reality of aging violently collide with the business reality of sports entertainment.
It's brutal to watch.
It is. But before we move from the decay of physical legacy to the absolute bizarre reality of modern digital promotion, let's take a quick break.
Before we dive deeper, we want to thank our sponsors who keep this show running. First, Elite Sports, the leaders in premium quality fightwear for BJJ and MMA. Whether you're rolling or striking, they've got the gear to keep you moving. Visit them at elitesports.com. And if you're a school owner looking to optimize your dojo's performance, you need to check out Lotus by Open Black Belt. It's the ultimate management software for tracking ranks, attendance, and billing. They are currently offering a free trial to our listeners. Streamline your business so you can spend more time on the mats. Visit openblackbelt.com to start your trial today. You can find links for both in the show notes. All right, so we've just thoroughly examined fighters who are relying on decades of physical legacy or political branding to secure their leverage.
The veterans.
Right. Now we have to look at a champion who is allegedly bypassing the physical world entirely to artificially manufacture his leverage.
The digital facade, yeah. We are transitioning from the stark reality of failing hip joints to the phantom metrics of Instagram. We have to talk about the reigning, undefeated lightweight champion, Ilia Topuria.
The man co-headlining the White House event.
The very same. Following the official announcement of the Freedom 250 card, Topuria's social media presence went completely supernova.
Just exploded.
In the span of just 4 days, his Instagram account gained over 400,000 followers.
Which is astronomical.
And on one specific day, March 10th, he gained over 200,000 followers in a single 24-hour window. Yeah. Almost immediately, major hubs in the MMA community, pages like Dovey and Full Man MMA, they started sounding the alarm. They are outright accusing Topuria of purchasing massive bot farms to artificially inflate his digital superstar status.
Because the raw numbers are undeniably jarring.
Here's where it gets really interesting when you look at the actual mathematical breakdown of this. Because analyzing the algorithms of social media growth, the bot theory actually has incredibly strong foundations.
Let's hear the math.
Okay, so Topuria currently sits at 13.6 million followers. That is a gargantuan number. It pushes him past Islam Makhachev, who sits at 13 million.
Leaving Topuria only chasing the mythical benchmark of Conor McGregor's 46.3 million.
Exactly. But it's not the total number that's suspicious. It's the velocity of the acquisition that raises major red flags.
The conversion rate of engagement.
Right. Even if Topuria's post announcing the White House fight goes incredibly viral and generates, say, 1.4 million likes, converting 400,000 of those likes into permanent followers in 96 hours completely breaks standard digital marketing algorithms.
It just doesn't happen organically.
No. In organic social media growth, a massively viral post might at best convert 1 to 3% of its engagement into actual new follows.
3% max.
To suddenly hit a 25 or 30% conversion rate overnight, that requires either an unprecedented cultural phenomenon or an automated script running out of a server farm somewhere.
And this really exposes a deeply toxic psychological burden placed on modern champions in 2026.
How so?
Well, it is no longer sufficient to merely be the most lethal, unarmed combatant on the planet. The UFC doesn't just want a fighter, they demand an influencer.
Ah, yeah. The entertainment factor.
Topuria is dealing with the crushing weight of the McGregor blueprint. Conor McGregor irreparably altered the economic structure of the sport by proving that a fighter's digital omnipresence is more lucrative than their actual win-loss record.
That's entirely true. Fans and media constantly accuse Topuria of trying too hard to emulate McGregor's arrogant, designer suit-wearing persona.
Because he feels the invisible pressure to justify his placement on this historic White House card. The modern fighter knows that if their digital footprint doesn't match the magnitude of their physical accomplishments, the promoters and the algorithms just deem them irrelevant.
The anxiety of influence is immense.
It is. Buying bots isn't just about vanity. In the twisted logic of modern promotion, inflating your digital leverage is seen as a necessary business expense to secure future contract negotiations.
Like an investment.
Right. If the UFC matches pay to perceived popularity, then faking popularity becomes a rational, albeit cynical, economic strategy.
I completely agree with the economic incentive, but I want to push back on the bot theory for a moment just to examine the alternative.
Okay, let's hear it.
What if this massive spike isn't malicious automation? What if it is simply the unquantifiable, chaotic bump of intersecting with the United States presidential event?
Oh, the introduction of a completely new demographic.
Exactly. Think about the audience that suddenly has eyes on this event. It is no longer confined to hardcore MMA fans breaking down striking differentials on Reddit.
Right, it's mainstream.
You suddenly have mainstream news consumers, you have political junkies, you have the massive, highly active digital base of Donald Trump supporters. Is it really a bot farm, or is it just the digital equivalent of an event tourist?
Event tourists, I like that.
Think about when a legacy rock band plays the Super Bowl halftime show. The next day, millions of people who can't name a single song by the band go out and buy their t-shirt or follow them on Spotify simply because they want to associate themselves with the cultural water cooler moment.
That is a fascinating mechanism to consider. When an athletic event transcends the boundaries of its sport and bleeds into mainstream cultural pageantry, the algorithms adjust.
They feed it to everyone.
A person interacting with a political news clip about the White House suddenly gets Ilia Topuria pushed to their Explore page. They click follow, not because they care about his grappling defense against Gaethje, but because he is tangentially related to the news cycle they're consuming.
Exactly.
However, the erratic nature of the metrics, like Topuria reportedly losing followers for a couple of days, and then suddenly spiking with another 168,000 in one day on March 13th.
Yeah, that's weird.
That specific pattern of volatile correction strongly mimics the behavior of Instagram purging fake accounts and a bot farm recalibrating to pump the numbers back up.
It is wild that we are sitting here analyzing data purging and follower conversion rates instead of analyzing footwork and combinations.
State of the sport in 2026.
Truly. But thankfully, our next subject drags us violently out of the digital ether and drops us right back into the brutal physical reality of the sport.
Back of the cage.
Yes. We are moving from potentially fabricated online drama to a profoundly real, incredibly visceral animosity that has been festering behind closed doors for 4 long years.
This specific matchup reminds us that beneath the corporate branding and the digital metrics, this is still fundamentally a business of physical domination and ego.
We are looking at the main event for UFC 328, scheduled for May 9th in Newark, New Jersey. We have the undefeated middleweight champion of the world, Khamzat Chimaev.
Standing at 15-0.
Standing at 15-0, making his first title defense against the former champion, Sean Strickland. Stylistically, this fight is a masterpiece. But the history between these two men is what makes it completely radioactive.
The sparring session that never ended.
The infamous empty gym sparring session. 4 years ago, long before Chimaev had the gold belt, he and Strickland locked themselves in a gym and sparred.
No cameras.
None. And since that exact day, both men have adamantly, fiercely claimed that they absolutely dominated and broke the other man.
Which is typical fighter ego, but this is extreme.
It is. There is no video footage. There are no scorecards. There is only their individual perception of what happened and their massive egos. And that unresolved dispute has mutated into pure vitriol.
It really has.
Strickland has been relentless in the media. He recently called Chimaev a coward, used highly derogatory slurs regarding his heritage, openly questioned his toughness, and berated him for his history of inactivity due to illness.
This raises an important question about the psychology of the alpha male hierarchy in a closed environment.
I've always wondered about this.
Imagine the setting of a high-level MMA gym. You have 2 apex athletes, men whose entire neurological wiring is built around establishing physical dominance over other men.
That's their entire identity.
They clash in an empty room. There's no referee to step in and officially declare a victor. There's no crowd to validate the reality of the outcome. The only truth is the tactile feedback they felt in that room.
The punches they landed.
Right. Professional fighters rely heavily on finality. They are conditioned to expect a bell to ring, a hand to be raised, and a hierarchy to be clearly defined. Exactly. To strip away that finality and force 2 monumental egos to sit on that unresolved tension for 4 years, it forces the brain to constantly revisit the trauma of the encounter. It turns a standard competitive rivalry into a deeply toxic, deeply personal obsession.
And now they finally get to settle that obsession under the brightest lights possible for the undisputed championship.
It's cinematic.
It is. And mechanically, looking at how their styles intersect, this fight is an absolute nightmare for both of them. Let's break down the physical tools.
Okay.
Khamzat Chimaev possesses a brand of grappling that is genuinely terrifying. This isn't just positional control. It is malicious, heavy wrestling. Look at UFC 308.
Right, the Whitaker fight.
He applied a face crank to Robert Whitaker, a seasoned veteran that was so structurally violent it literally caved in Whitaker's front teeth. He completely ragdolled Dricus du Plessis at UFC 319.
It is the relentless nature of his offensive chain.
Exactly. We have to talk about chain wrestling. When Chimaev shoots for a takedown, it isn't a single isolated movement. If his opponent defends the initial double leg, Chimaev doesn't reset.
He just flows to the next attack.
Immediately. He transitions to a body lock, then blocks the far knee, then looks for an inside trip. He strings 5 offensive maneuvers together in the span of 3 seconds.
Which is exhausting to defend.
Mechanically, this forces the opponent's brain to process complex defensive calculations at a terrifying speed. It fries the central nervous system. It floods the opponent's arms and legs with lactic acid because they are constantly resisting massive isometric force.
He imposes an undeniable physical tax on his opponent's cardio.
But look at the man he is facing. Sean Strickland is coming off a brutal TKO victory over Anthony Hernandez. And Strickland's style is the absolute antithesis of explosive chain wrestling.
He's a completely different animal.
He fights with this upright, almost awkward posture, utilizing a variation of the Philly shell. He doesn't rely on fast twitch athleticism. He relies on a high-volume, relentless barrage of straight jabs and teep kicks to the midsection.
Smarting forward.
Always. And his takedown defense is phenomenal because his stance allows him to immediately frame off his opponent's biceps and drop his hips.
And this is where the emotional history of the fight becomes the deciding mechanical factor.
How so?
Emotion is the absolute enemy of cardiovascular endurance.
Yes. If Chimaev cannot get Strickland to the mat in the first 3 minutes, or if he completely blows out his arms trying to drag Strickland down against the fence, Strickland has the exact kind of attritional, cardio-heavy boxing style to make the later rounds sheer torture.
It's what he does best.
And Strickland does this intentionally. He talks during the fight. He insults his opponents while parrying their strikes. He uses verbal harassment to regulate his own breathing and to spike his opponent's heart rate.
So if Chimaev enters that octagon fighting angry, if he is trying to vindicate his ego and settle a 4-year-old insult rather than executing a cold, calculated game plan, he will flood his own bloodstream with cortisol.
He'll empty his gas tank.
He will adrenaline dump in the first round. Strickland is a master at drowning emotional fighters in deep waters. It is a profound test of Chimaev's emotional regulation as much as his physical stamina.
It's a brilliant clash of methodologies. Now, Chimaev and Strickland represent the absolute pinnacle of the sport. They are the championship tier.
The elite of the elite.
But the entire foundation of the UFC, the biological engine that ensures the sport survives year after year, is built on the constant, unforgiving churn of the roster.
It's the cycle of the sport.
It's the established veterans being fed to the rising youth. Which brings us to our final focal point today, the circle of combat. We need to examine the current matchmaking landscape, specifically the massive age gaps and the brutal process of prospect testing.
It is the inevitable biological changing of the guard, and it is rarely a peaceful transition.
Recently, we saw Josh Emmett fight Kevin Vallejos, which officially marked the largest age gap in the history of a UFC main event.
The promotion is deliberately matching generations against each other right now.
And looking ahead to UFC Fight Night Perth on May 2nd, 2026, we have a pristine example of this dynamic playing out. We have a highly touted, rising Australian prospect named Quillan Salkeld.
He's looking incredible.
He is currently 4-0 in the UFC. He is knocking people unconscious. He is riding a massive wave of youthful hype. And the UFC is taking him and throwing him directly into the deep end against the ultimate veteran puzzle, the Neil Dariush.
Oh, Dariush is an absolute labyrinth for a young fighter to navigate.
It really is. Dariush holds decisive wins over a murderer's row of competition. Drew Dober, Tony Ferguson, Matthias Gamrot.
Guys who break other fighters.
Right. Mechanically, how does a young, explosive, fast-twitch fighter like Salkeld approach a battle against a man with that much institutional knowledge? Because this is the classic, age-old battle of physical attributes versus fight IQ.
Youth versus wisdom.
Salkeld has the undeniable advantages of youth. Absolute speed, explosive muscle fibers, incredibly rapid cellular recovery between rounds. and the unshakable confidence of a fighter who has not yet experienced being physically broken inside the cage.
That innocence is a weapon in itself. But Dariush possesses something far more insidious to a young fighter.
What's that?
Anticipation.
Exactly. Dariush doesn't need to be faster than Salkhild. He operates like a piece of malware in the younger fighter's operating system.
I love that analogy.
He knows exactly how to introduce tiny, frustrating physical glitches into Salkhild's rhythm. He knows how to use subtle framing, placing a forearm against the collarbone, securing an underhook to disrupt the kinetic chain of a punch before it even fully extends.
Just smothering the power.
He knows how to initiate a grueling clinch against the fence, not to get a takedown, but simply to drape his body weight over Salkhild's hips and drain the explosive energy from the prospect's legs.
He fundamentally alters the pacing of the fight. A young knockout artist wants a sprint. Dariush forces them into a swamp.
Strategically, Salkhild has to exercise extreme patience.
He cannot rush into the subtle traps Dariush is setting. He has to feint, draw out Dariush's reactions, and refuse to engage in the grinding tie-ups.
But asking a four-arc prospect, who is used to instantly destroying whatever is in front of him, to suddenly display the patience of a chess grandmaster.
That is an incredibly difficult psychological ask.
And that is the beautiful, brutal reality of mixed martial arts. It's a dynamic you simply do not see as starkly in team sports.
No, you don't.
In MMA, the veterans literally act as the physical gatekeepers. The promotion explicitly asks them to put their hard-earned legacy, their brain cells, and their joint health on the line to physically test the hunger and viability of the next generation.
It is a literal passing of the torch. And in this sport, that torch usually has to be violently pried from cold, stiff fingers.
It's never just handed over.
Never. The motivations are completely polarized here. Dariush is no longer fighting for the illusion of a championship title. He is fighting for survival. He is fighting to prove to himself and to the corporate algorithm that he still belongs in the room.
And Salkhild.
Salkhild is fighting to prove he deserves to take Dariush's seat at the table. It is the most primal, unvarnished dynamic in human competition.
It really is. It's the raw biological engine that keeps the whole machine moving forward, long after the digital metrics fade and the political spectacles pack up their tents.
And, if we step back and survey this massive, complex landscape we've mapped out today, it brings us to a rather profound final thought for you, the listener, to carry with you.
Lay it on us.
We've talked about fighters dealing with the sensory overload of competing on the literal lawn of the White House amidst unprecedented historical pageantry. We've analyzed reigning champions who are allegedly buying hundreds of thousands of digital bots just to artificially inflate their perceived cultural relevance.
Right.
We've seen an all-time legend in Jon Jones battling the devastating reality of bone-on-bone hip arthritis, begging a corporation for his release because his physical legacy holds no weight against modern financial algorithms. We've dissected 4-year-old gym grudges driven by pure ego, and we've watched aging veterans bleed just to hold off the inevitable tide of youth.
It's a lot to take in.
When you synthesize all of these chaotic elements, it forces you to ask one central question. What is the true currency of a fighter in the year 2026?
Is it the physical gold belt wrapped around their waist?
Is it the rapidly refreshing follower count on their social media profiles?
Is it the sheer number of zeros printed on their promotional contract?
Or is it still, deep down, the unspoken, undeniable respect earned from another man in an empty gym? As the spectacle of the sport grows exponentially larger, you have to genuinely wonder if the corporate business of fighting has finally and irreversibly overshadowed the physical art of fighting.
A question that every single athlete stepping onto the canvas has to answer for themselves in the dark. That's it for this episode. Thanks for joining us to talk about the latest in martial arts. We will be back soon with more news, stories, and insights. Until then, remember to train hard and stay humble. If you have any news to share, reach out to us at budocast.com and follow us on our social media platforms.